You can do anything you want, you just can't do X. This is an example of a can't rule that I use with my athletes when coaching speed, agility, and just general movement. My name is Matt Tomets, and I coach all of the youth athletic development program here at TC Boost Sports Performance, as well as our middle and high school classes. In this video, I'm going to take you through how I use can't rules to spark creativity in my athletes and get them to think outside the box. The main premise of this video, or why this is important, or how this sparks creativity, is that as a coach, your words are valuable. How you cue drills, just how you describe instructions and things like that. And telling an athlete you can do A, B, and C, or telling an athlete you can't do D, are two completely different mindsets that an athlete is going to have when they attack a drill. So telling them explicitly what they can do, their mind is just going to put them in this box of they have those three options. Versus if you just take one option off the table, they have to fill in the blanks and think outside the box and to figure out what those other options are on their own. So what this looks like in real time is actually pretty simple. You have movements or qualities that you're trying to train, and as you progress over time, people add variations. You add things that they can do, but instead try adding more restrictions as they go, or just change the variations in this restrictive fashion. So instead of just giving them more options to just check off the box, or just their mind have these boxes that they can do, take boxes off the table so they have to create more boxes on their own, and that's where this creativity component comes into it. Here's two quick examples that I found success in with using these can't rules. First is with our plyo boxes. I'll set up 3 boxes spaced apart, and the athlete will have to go from ground to box, ground to box, ground box. After doing a few reps, just feeling out that movement task, I'll say, okay, now when you're on the ground, you cannot be facing forwards. They'll do that a few more times, and I'll say, okay, you can face forward on the ground now, but you cannot be facing forwards when you're on the box itself. So the athlete has to figure out how to accomplish this movement task while not doing something. So they have to figure out in real time what they can do and also achieve the task. Second, we'll do broad jumps forward for 10 yards. And I'll say you cannot land in the same direction that you were facing. So the first jump, you're facing forwards, you're jumping forwards, but you cannot land facing forwards. So you'll jump to the left, okay? So then how do we still jump in the forward direction, facing left, but not landing left? Here's a few things I learned while implementing my can't rules. First is that athletes do not like thinking outside the box. I'll explain the instructions of the general drill, and then I'll put the can't rule on them. And the first thing they always say is, well, can I do this? Or can I do that? So immediately I see the wheels turning in their brain, and the first thought is, okay, like I have to create boxes, like I have to wrap my head around something. So they'll say, can I do this? I'm like, all I said is that you cannot do X, but they're trying to figure out what Y and Z are before the drill even starts. Second is that athletes will put themselves in boxes as they're performing the movement task. They'll create rhythms or patterns for themselves that's just easier for them to wrap their head around. So for example, in the broad jump example, athletes will jump forward to the left, then back to the center, and then to the right, and then to the center. And then after I see them do that, then put themselves in a box, I'll say, okay, you can't be landing in the same direction you were facing. And second, you can't do a pattern. It's gotta be some sort of randomness to it. Last thing I learned is that athletes are actually pretty smart. Similar to number 2 of what I learned. Number 3 is that some can't rules will just expose themselves just the more you do more tasks and drills and games, as athletes will figure out the most efficient or the most rhythmic, the most comfortable way to do stuff. So there's some rules that you can make beforehand that you think you want to experiment and see how they do, but sometimes you'll just have to go and do full speed, and the rules will kind of make themselves as you go. I've seen this a lot in our tag and game variations, where athletes will find an easy way to beat the system. I'll say, hey, you can't do that. And they freak out. But athletes are smart, and they'll figure it out. So you have to be very aware of watching and figuring out how they're trying to accomplish the task. Because if you're saying what they can't do, you have to be aware of what they actually are doing and consequently coach from there. This is super valuable to your athletes because you're creating athletes, not movement robots. They're not athletes just accomplishing these movement tasks in these boxes that you've created for them. We're creating game-like conditions done in real time, game speed, where they have all these variables that they have to keep in mind, and they have to have rules that they can't do that will result in penalties and stuff like that, as well as rules that they can do. So this is an awesome way to spark that creativity component, do stuff in real time that's going to transfer over to their sport. So how does this actually work on creativity? As I've alluded to in this entire video, you will be able to watch and you'll be able to foster drills, movements, games where athletes have to create boxes, create options, create movement tasks, and create ways to achieve them on their own in real time in this movement, speed, and agility context. So how you describe stuff as a coach, how you use your words, if it's more restrictive in nature, not negative, but just restrictive, then you're giving athletes freedom and you're giving them a requirement to them having to figure it out on their own because you're not creating those boxes for them. So there's a lot of room to experiment. There's a lot of room to learn your athletes better and figure out how their brain works and how they try to accomplish these movement tasks. So the possibilities are endless. It's a lot of fun, kind of just learning your athletes, seeing what they do, and be creative, have a lot of fun with it, and happy coaching.